Hello. So this is going to be primarily a review of the Schiit Audio Vali 2 amplifier, the new Tube Hybrid from Schiit Audio. It's been about a month since I've had this. It came out in early December, and it's a very good offering in the budget Tube Hybrid amp category. Now, before I get into the review, I'm going to talk about just a little bit about hybrid amps in general, hybrid tube amplifiers in general. The reason I want to talk about that is just because there's a lot of misinformation, then there's a lot of different topologies for these amplifiers. So I want to take a few minutes to discuss another amplifier that I have, another hybrid tube, just discuss the differences and my opinion about it, and then I'm going to move to the Vali 2 because, well, as you'd expect, the Vali 2 is an excellent amplifier. Basically, I think everything that Schiit Audio makes is very good, but that's for in a few minutes. Right now, let's move the Vali out of the way and bring in this. What is this? Well, this is some may know it, it's the Bravo Audio V3, or the version 3 of the Bravo Audio. Now, this amplifier is another hybrid tube. You can see it basically comes bare naked, and well, that's basically what its appeal is for a lot of customers, including myself. This amplifier is a different type of amplifier than the Vali 2. They're both hybrids, but what is a tube hybrid? What's the difference between tube hybrids of sorts, and what is all this hybrid design? Well, a tube hybrid amplifier is just simply an amplifier that uses a tube and a solid state device like a MOSFET or a BJT, bipolar junction transistor, for part of the amplification, and this makes it more efficient, saves a lot of money, and it makes it a lot less power intensive. It also gives you relatively less distortion. You don't need output transformers. There's a lot of benefits, smaller packaging, portability. There's a ton of different options for tube amplifiers that are hybrid designs. Now, the reason I bring this Bravo Audio one is because there's so many different hybrids these days that it's just becoming a very saturated market, I'd say. So there's a lot of misinformation, and especially with these hybrids, there's some that you see that are battery powered. Whenever you see something like a tube that's battery powered, you should be pretty suspicious. You could do it with sub-miniature tubes like the Vali 1 by Schiit Audio, which was not battery powered. It had sub-miniature tubes. I did not use that product myself. I'm not a huge fan of sub-miniature tubes, but they're fine. But when you see battery powered on tubes, you should be a little wary, because no matter what, tubes draw a decent voltage, or they should draw a decent voltage. And that's my second point. My second point will be that many of the hybrid amps that you see out there, especially the ones that are like $20, $30, those amplifiers are going to be just for show when it comes to the tube part. There's, again, a lot of, to put it bluntly, just a lot of lies in the audio industry. And there's a lot of truth as well, and there's a lot of people who are misinformed in between those truths and lies, and it gets a little confusing sometimes, but there's certainly a market for tubes, and tubes they provide a sound that's unique and works for certain people, for certain equipment, for certain headphones, for certain even genres of music. There's a market, and it's a valid market. There's a lot of misinformation, but tubes are really a valid piece of audio equipment still for certain buyers. Now, a lot of these tube amps, these hybrid tube amps, especially these cheap hybrid tube amps, are not really using the tubes. So I'm gonna put a link in the video, just done a few days ago by Dave from EEV blog, and he tears down and reverse engineers one of these cheap dual triode or dual pentode, I think, tube amps, hybrid tube amps. And as you'll see if you watch that video, this tube amp uses like 12 volts on the plate of the tube, which is extremely low for a tube, uses an op amp, and when you see something like that in a cheap configuration from a no-name, non-reputable company or someone that doesn't describe it very, efficiently, you should be suspicious, because when you see like LEDs everywhere and tubes everywhere, and it makes it look really hi-fi, but many of the times the tube is just there and it's basically being starved. At 12 volts on the plate, you're talking about basically using the tube for nothing, and the op amp in that case of the one that I'm referring to in the video that I'll link in, that one is just really, the tube is not doing much. Now in this Bravo Audio one, you'll see I'm going to be pretty brief about it, and I'm also going to put a link in the description to the Bravo Audio V3 review I did. It's not a video review or anything, but it is a decent review, decently long review, and I try to be as thorough as I can. Now, one thing I'll note is that with all my reviews, I'm very price dependent. So if something costs $500, I'm going to give it a different review than something that costs $50. It just makes sense. There's just no reason to rate two pieces of equipment that are fundamentally different in price. And that's why I gave the Bravo Audio, which is what you're seeing in front of you, I gave that a good rating, because I think it's a good value. It cost about $75 new, but I actually was able to get mine for roughly $50, and I actually have two of them, and I'll show you. They're the exact same, but one of them is removed all the parts. Everything's basically removed, all the important components at least. So this one is a complete one. The actual amplifier comes with this case of sorts. I'll just put it in front, you can sort of see it. And well, there's nothing special. You just need to remove these 4 screws, and then you basically get this off, and well, you have the PCB. Now, because of this inherent design, you're going to get a lot of noise. Everything is going to be heard. If your tube is noisy, you're going to hear it. If you have RF noise, which is very, very, very easy to pick up, you're going to hear it. Additionally, the components are not that good, especially out of the box. Cheap capacitors, the power supply is pretty cheap, noisy, the connectors are cheap, everything is basically cheap. However, if I had to describe the Bravo Audio in one word, I'd say it's fun. It's a fun thing to use. I don't use it. It's not my primary amp. I have several amplifiers, but this is not my primary one. In fact, I only used it for a few weeks when I originally bought it to play with it. It's really just a fun thing to play with. It's a fun hybrid to play with. And it's at $50, which is what I was able to get it for, essentially brand new. If you don't have time to roll the PCB yourself and design the circuit, it's a very simple circuit, mind you, but everything just comes already, soldered, so you can just take everything apart that you wish, play around with it, modify it. It's already, in a little package. And so that's why it's fun. It's kind of an enthusiast thing. It's just a fun thing to play with. And you can see on this one, this is not the actual stock one. The only difference between this and the stock one is that I replaced the capacitors. You can see this is the main power cap, and that's these two here are the output capacitors, and all 3 of them were replaced with Nichicon KA series capacitors, which are good for audio. Now, you'll see actually that the original casing here doesn't actually even fit on the... Sorry, I have it backwards here. doesn't actually fit on the amplifier anymore. And the reason is, well, I changed these output capacitors, and these output capacitors are actually higher capacitance, and those affect the frequency response, because the frequency response of an output capacitors, or any capacitor rather, is dependent on the capacitance. So we're not going to get into that too much, but just it's why they doesn't fit anymore. Now, to go over the topology of this really quickly, again, in my review sort of goes into more detail, but not really. I mean, this is a very simple circuit here, nothing special with these hybrids. I will say that this is a real hybrid, that's why I bought it up. This is one of the more real hybrids out there. It's not very refined, it's certainly not refined, it's just a fun enthusiast kind of DIY style thing, but you know, it's what it is, and it's cheap, and it gets the job done for those kind of things. Now, the topology is very basic. It does have this cool kind of nice feature, which is just a 3-band passive EQ, and you know, you got your bass, you got your mids, you got your highs, and it's just a basic resistor capacitor based filtering passive EQ. Everything is passive, nothing active on there. It's very simple. The basic topology, you have your output for your headphones there. You got your inputs, which can be just a 3.5 millimeter or a RCA. You got your tube socket with a blue LED in the middle. Gotta have your LEDs. I'm not sure why manufacturers for tubes love to put LEDs on there, but they like to, so what can I say? And then you got over here, you have 2 transistors, and those are 2 N3906s, as well as a red LED, and that red LED is very important because it serves as a diode. As you know, LEDs are diodes, and well, certain color LEDs have different characteristics, different dropout voltages, forward voltages. So, well, they work very well as diodes. You have on this one, you have since it's a class A operated, you actually have over here, you'll see these 2 biasing pots. You can actually bias your tube, and you have tube because it's a dual triode for stereo, and that's basically the circuit in here is double everything. You have 2 giant heat sinks for your power MOSFETs. Those are IRF 630s, I believe, and then you have your 2 LM317 voltage regulators that serve as constant current sources. And the power MOSFETs are in class A, so they're fully conducting 100% of the time. You have a lot of heat dissipation, hence the giant heat sinks. It is pretty inefficient, as any class A design is, and it runs very hot. These things can get up to, I believe, almost 40 degrees Celsius at times when I measured them, so they can get pretty hot. And the overall, this is a pretty decent, fun tube. Now, I'm going to stop talking about the Bravo audio because, well, it's not the main focus of this video, although it took up almost 14 minutes here. So, just go ahead and move that out of the way. And really quickly, just going to show you, for anyone who's interested, this is a bare version of it. You can see I accidentally, at the time, this was quite a while back, the pads burnt off of this one. But I was able to still use it from the other side. The soldering quality and the PCB quality is not that good, as you'd expect on a cheaper one on this Bravo. You can see this is where the 2 MOSFETs and their heatsink went. This is where the 2 voltage regulators and their heatsink went. And then the capacitor is your main power capacitor, and then your 2 output capacitors. It's funny because this whole thing is 24 volts DC input, and you can actually see that the 2 output capacitors are 35 volt. When you remove them, that's what the PCB silk screen says, but they actually come with 25 volt by default, which is funny because, well, 25 volts is pretty close. So when I replace them, I replace them with 35 volts. I replaced them at 25 volts here because these ones are only going to have roughly half of that voltage, only like 10 or 9, 10, 11 volts, less than half because it's stereo, so it's split between two channels. So it's very odd that their power capacitor here is rated for 25 volts as it was, which is only a 1 volt threshold, while these ones supposed to be 35, came with 25, and they don't need even that much. So that's just shows you that this wasn't paid that much attention to when it was built. It's not that good of a build quality. Everything's pretty cheap, but it is what it is, and it's not that bad. But it just to note it is a real tube hybrid amplifier, just a different topology. Now we're going to move on to the star of the show, and that is the Vali. This is the Schiit Audio Vali 2 amplifier. This is, again, about a month and a half old now, almost. You know, it's a pretty damn good amp. It runs for $169, which is a little bit more expensive than the Bravo Audio, but it's light years ahead. If I had to pick one word to define the Vali 2, it would be refined. I said the Bravo was fun. Well, the Vali 2 is fun in its own ways, but it's refined. That's really what I'd like to say about it. It's a refined amplifier. So just a quick overview of the outside. We have our 6.35 millimeter or quarter-inch jack for your headphones. A nice potentiometer here. It's a good potentiometer here. If you turn it around, we actually have we actually have a input and thus an RCA input. We have preamp output, so we can do preamps. I don't use it as a preamp, but it's nice that they add preamp output because that'll definitely be useful for a lot of people. We have a high-low gain switch, and we have a power on and off, and these are all nice quality parts. Everything's very nice and clicky. As well as that, we have a 24 and 6 volt DIN connector, so it's a dual voltage connector here that from the power supply we get 24 and 6 volts separately on separate rails, so we can actually provide the high voltage, the 24, to the tube components, and the lower voltage, the 6 volts, to the solid states, to the LEDs and things like that. So we are able to provide separate voltage, which makes the amplifier thermally efficient in a compact case. It allows them to save space inside and lower the cost, and a bunch of other benefits that you get from that. So inside the tube, inside the amp is all the circuitry. You don't need much in terms of heat sinking. You'll notice that right away, and we're going to actually open it up. That's the fun part here, because I really do want to show you the inside, because I think, as they say, it's what's inside that counts. We're going to talk about the sound quality in a moment, but really what's inside, it's just magnificent. It really shows the craftsmanship that Schiit Audio pays attention even to their budget amplifiers. One thing I'd like to say about the company is I'm a new customer. I don't have any other products by Schiit Audio. I've known about them for a while, but I was not a customer before this amp. My first product from them. Not my first amplifier, but my first Schiit Audio amplifier. Now, it's an excellent amplifier, but more so, before I even purchased the amp, before I even knew how it sounded, I was very impressed with the site. The site has all the information. It's very upfront. It's a no bullshit company. That's a huge benefit in my books for audio, because there's so much misinformation in audio. And it's just so gratifying to see that we're able to get a company that's just upfront. They separate their price classes. They tell you that this costs this much money, this costs that much money. You know, this is the reason why this is more money. Everything's laid out for you. Now, the default stock tube is a RCA tube. It's a Canadian-made RCA tube. Now, I'm going to remove that for a second, and we're going to talk about the sound quality. Well, the sound quality in this amp is very good. While the Bravo got a distortion level, I think a 0.1% rated distortion. This one is orders of magnitude better. I think 0.05 or even, yeah, 0.04, 0.05, something like that. It's an order of magnitude better. That's because it's a class AB, not class A, and you'll notice that there's not many heat sinks or heat needed because it's one, with their power supply, and two, it's just a more efficient package because of the class AB design, and we'll get into that when we open it just briefly, but that means that it's able to utilize that topology, and that topology makes it very efficient, and therefore there's no heat sinks. You won't find any giant heat sinks in this product. So let's move it aside for a second and look at these tubes. So we have the power or the ability to roll in this amplifier. So we can actually roll our tubes or change our tubes out and see what fits our sound. So the three tubes I have here is an Electro-Harmonic 6922 Russian made. We have a JJ E88CC that's made in the old Tesla factory, and it's a gold pin. These are identical tubes in terms of series. The 6922 and the E88CC are both the exact same tube, just different numbering systems in the countries that they're made in. And then we have the stock tube that came with it, which is a NOS tube, a new old stock. It's a 6B Z7, I believe. Yes, 6BZ7. So, I'm not going to talk much about the 6922 because, well, the Electro-Harmonics one, it's the worst out of the bunch. Since I have the... So I apologize about that. The battery in my camera just died on me, so I had to quickly put another one in. So, apologize if there's a slight gap in the few seconds prior to this. Anyway, what I was saying was, I'm not going to talk much about the 6922 by Electro-Harmonics, the Russian one, because I have the E88CC, which is the equivalent, same tube, same, these are all triodes, dual triodes for stereo. This is a better tube all around in terms of the series. So it's a gold pin, better contacts, it's much quieter, no harmonics, it's matched. Sorry, no microphonics, it's matched. Both channels are matched. It's a nicely made tube. You can still buy them. They're not new old stock. They're been around. They're still making them. So I'm gonna remove the Electro-Harmonics out of the picture. Now we have two tubes. When I first got the Vali 2, I put in the JJ because that's the one I've been using, the JJ gold pin, the E88CC gold pin, and I put that in right away because that's just the one I was using. And right away I noticed that, you know, it sounded pretty damn good. There was no distortion. Everything was extremely quiet. There's no microphonics. Even if your tube has microphonics, you can't really hear it with the Vali 2. It does an excellent job at noise rejection. There's no RF because it's in a beautiful shielded case. Very heavy, very nice feel in the hands. The power supply, which I'll talk about right now, actually, forgot to mention it earlier. So I'll just move these back for a brief moment. The power supply, as you can see, is just giant. It's a giant power supply. It's quite a massive power supply with that DIN connector. I prefer these massive power supplies over the light power supplies. I'll take a good heavy power supply any day. But getting back to seriousness here, it's a proper linear power supply with regulation on every rail. So that's just generally a good thing. I mean, when we have regulation on every rail, that means that it's a proper linear power supply. It's not going to have much noise. It's also pretty big because it provides that special DIN connector. You can see here, There's a DIN connector, and you can see that that DIN connector's get in focus there. That DIN connector is going to provide us 6 and 24 volts DC, clean DC. So that's another thing you're not going to get with the Bravo design. You're not going to get very good. You're not going to get much good out of the power supply. When I played around with the Bravo, I would just use my my Precision Lab DC power supply to actually power it. That was what I used. Never actually used it much after that, so I never, managed to mod it with a nice power supply. You could just buy a nice power supply, but it's not a big deal. Anyway, back to the tubes here. So I actually tried this amp out with the Vali 2 with the 300 ohm Bear Dynamics I have. Now, I don't use those very much at all, and my main primary listening headphone is the Fostex TH-900. Now, if you know anything about the Fostex TH-900 headphones, they're excellent headphones. They're regarded as one of the best closed back headphones. They're the flagship of Fostex, which used to make all the Denon headphones, like the D7000 and the D5000, but they're excellent headphones. I have them slightly modded. I have used a lot in ear pads, and I have some dampening in there. And so they are a V-shaped frequency response with a definite bass, natural bass extension on the frequency curve, as well as a natural slight treble. And some people say that the treble is too much. Well, I find it okay because I listen to deep house and tech house and those deeper genres of music, electronic music, like especially deeper music, and that's generally the music that the Fostex house sound, as you would call it, is designed for. That's many of the people who use Fostex headphones use them for that kind of music because, well, they're good for any type of music, but they have that signature V curve. It's not as much as something like the Ultrasone 900s, which have a very heavy bass curve and a heavy treble curve. It's not that much, but it's pretty noticeable, pretty bassy. It's definitely a bass head kind of headphone. Now, I like that. It's the kind of music I listen to. It's mostly focuses on the treble and the bass, and I don't mind the treble on the TH-900. It's really not that bad. Some people think it's too high, it's sibilance, and I don't have that issue. But I use the JJ tube in the Vali tube. I noticed that it was a little harsh on the treble. Not too much. It was still an excellent tube, don't get me wrong. It's a great tube. It's only like $20 as well, so it's not a bad price. And it was great on the bass. The mids were just where they were with the headphones natural frequency curve. So some people say the mids on the TH-900 Fostex headphones are recessed. They're not really recessed. It's more like because of the frequency extension of the bass and the high frequencies, the treble you get in naturally. That's just how sound works. You're not going to see the emphasis as much on the mid-range, and that matters for certain songs, certain genres, certain vocals, all that kind of stuff. So that's why a tube actually works surprisingly well. Now, these are actually low impedance. The Fostex headphones are actually only 25 or 28 ohms nominal impedance, very low impedance. So I only have to use it on the low gain mode and on the Vali 2. Remember, the Vali 2 has two modes, low and high. You always want to use the low mode because it's quieter by default. And if you have to, then go to the high gain mode, but it's best to use the low and then go to the high. The high is there especially for the higher, because remember, this amplifier is trying to design itself to fit low impedance and high impedance, even like 600 ohms, and even some high efficiency or some high efficiency planar headphones. Sorry. So another benefit of hybrids is that I didn't mention it earlier, but with both the Bravo and the Vali 2, you're gonna get the hybrid architecture, which is the benefit of the In the Bravo, it's the MOSFETs. In the Vali 2, it'll be the BJT transistors. The current gain is provided by those devices, and it's able to match the impedance and allow you to use the hybrid amplifiers with a big range of headphones. Whereas before, back in the days, usually you had to use high impedance sources for your tube amplifiers. So this allows you to use lower impedance sources. So that's quite interesting. That's nice. Now, after listening to the stock JJ tube, not the stock tube, the JJ tube, which was kind of like my go-to tube, I put in the stock tube. I wasn't expecting to like the stock tube because most people, it's just the stock tube. But it's an RCA tube. It's an RCA Canadian-made RCA 6B Z7 or 6BQ7A. So, it's a decent tube. It's a new old stock. I put it in and I was instantly blown away. Very noticeable difference. On the bass and the treble, this tube keeps it exactly for my TH-900 headphones. Okay, again, everything varies depending on your headphones. For the TH-900s, it did exactly what I wanted a tube hybrid to do. It bought out the mids quite a bit. It made the mids quite warm, and that gives, when you do that, since the mid-range is quite a big sound frequency range in terms of audible frequencies, it increases the soundstage quite a bit, and you're actually able to get the soundstage. I hesitate to use the word, but basically kind of like a three-dimensional. It's sort of a gimmicky word, but it's just an open, airy soundstage, and that's what you want with a tube amplifier or a tube hybrid amplifier. You want the open soundstage. So that's what I got, and it kept the bass just nice and punchy where it should be, and it kept the treble where it should be, as in it kept kind of a flat frequency response for the bass and the treble, which already is naturally enhanced with the TH-900s that I have. So that combination of increasing the warmth of the mids and keeping the treble and bass where they are evened everything out, made it really nice, airy soundstage with that good bass, that treble that's there but not overboard, and everything just blended together. So I'm really happy with the stock tube that I have right here, this Canadian RCA one, and I think I'm gonna keep it. I could roll it, I could buy other tubes. People spend money on all the tubes. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of doing that on an amplifier that only costs $169. I'm not going to spend $500 on tubes. That being said, if you have the tubes, go for it. It's just fun. Some people say rolling makes no difference. It certainly does. You can tell the difference between it. And that's another thing. This Vali 2, again, utilizes 60 volts on the plate. Now, remember earlier in the video, in the beginning, I was saying 12 volts. Are on some cheap amplifiers, some cheap hybrids that are not really hybrids in my opinion. They're just kind of for show. This one is utilizing 60 volts on the plate, which is a true voltage for a tube. The tube is doing the voltage amplification properly, and that's really, really impressive. So overall, I love the Vali 2. It's an excellent amplifier. It's an excellent product by Schiit Audio. I'm definitely going to buy more of their products. Their DACs and everything. I've read a lot. I am a math person myself, so I know a lot about the architecture of DACs, and I do think their multi-bit DAC series is certainly a very interesting offer, and I'm really looking forward to trying it soon. So I'm going to probably pick up one of their multi-bit DACs soon, and even maybe a different amplifier as well. I just wanted to try out one of their products, their more low-end budget product, just to see how this company was, because this is my first product with Schiit Audio. And so enough talking about the outside. Really, I want to show you a quick look on the inside, because if you think the outside is beautiful and the sound quality is great, well, the inside really impressive. So I'll be back in just a minute. I'm going to pop open. It's just 4 screws in the top, and it just comes right off. So we'll be right back. Alright guys, so we're back, and we're going to go ahead and open this up. Got the screws off. Let's go ahead and take this off. Comes off very easily. It's a very nice machined chassis over here. You can see it's quite well done. Get that in focus. Now, I'm not going to take the PCB out. I could take the PCB out. It's just a few screws, but there's no point. You can see everything, and it's just going to take a while to put back together. A few more extra minutes that you don't need to do. So you get everything you need to, and I'll try to zoom in just a little bit. Get the everything in focus there. So inside we see a immaculate design. First of all, most of the stuff is made in the USA, or most of the important parts, the chassis, the PCB. Normally they're transformers, or there's no transformers in here. They use a wall adapter that's not made in the USA, but they tell you that. Again, like I said, I love the fact that they're transparent about everything. It's really commendable. I don't really see many other companies in the audio industry, especially because there's so much misinformation. I mean, some companies would sell this exact style amplifier and they'll call it some super world-class deluxe, and they'll slap like a few fancy LEDs in the front or some gold plating everywhere and just say this is a $1,000 amplifier. Well, no, Schiit Audio will tell you the exact how they'll tell you why it's worth this much. What's the difference between this and their, say their Walhalla or their more expensive tube amps, or what is the difference between this DAC and that DAC. They just tell you everything up front, and it's quite impressive. So when we go open this up, we can actually see that there is quite a lot of engineering going on, and it's actually quite a nice design. It's a very well built amp. Remember what I said earlier, one way to describe this, my word, if I had to pick one, is refined. It's a very refined product. And if you look at the Bravo Audio amp, and this is just the Bravo Audio one with all the parts removed, just looking at something even like the switch over here, you can see this little tiny little switch. I mean, it's barely anything. And when you look at something like this, we have these nice big switches here. This is your gain, high and low. This is your power on and off. They're nice plunk power switches. Now, there's a few things I'm going to point out. I'm not going to reverse engineer this whole thing, but I'm just going to, that's not my purpose here. I'm just going to point out a few things about the topology, how it differs from the Bravo really quickly. You can see these 4 devices here. There's one there, one there, one there, one there. They're identical sets on this side and this side. You have 4 BJTs. The numbers are on there, hard to read, but they are 4 BJTs. I believe one is slightly more powerful than the other. Haven't done much, research on the inside, but you have the tube socket, obviously, 4 BJTs. Now those BJTs, a benefit of BJTs is that they're pretty low noise by default. They're very simple. They're simple devices. They're not very complex. And the BJTs are going to be providing us the current gain. While again, the 60 volts, which is a very nice, commendable, good amount, and 60 volts up here is going to be providing us the voltage gain, and the current gain is going to be provided by those BJTs. So that everything's good on that part. Second thing that's really commendable is that they have this protection here. They have this relay. This relay is going to provide us with the protection when you start up. This is going to be a soft start or a mute relay that mutes when you start up and stop, so that when you can keep your headphones plugged in all the time. This is pretty big for hybrid amps. Now for full-on tube amps, you don't need to do that because the tube needs to heat up anyway, but for hybrids, it's a good idea to put a nice relay in there. You'll hear that relay click and it'll be mute when you first start it up for a few seconds, and then it'll unmute, the relay will click, and that's just to protect your headphones, as well as allow the devices to heat up, the tube to heat up. Another thing that's very well engineered is, well, this isolation they have. You can see right here. This is the power section. This is the signal section, or the section that is amplified, where your signal comes in and your signal goes out. It is separated nicely. This separation in the PCB, that is what you basically want. You want this isolation. You want this separation. It's just a good design practice. And for the price, you don't see that kind of isolation if you look at a product like this. Now, You see that isolation in the Wali too, though, and they are consistent even at this price, the budget price range. The other thing is that all the caps, all the capacitors are Nichigan brand, which is one of the top quality for electrolytics, and well, that's always a benefit. You can see these are the voltage regulators here, and well, these caps are all high quality. You can see that they're using proper Nichikan caps for the power, but then you can see that they use these fine golds, or this, I don't know, it's not fine gold, but it's one of the audio series capacitors for the Nichikan brand. Either way, you know, any Nichikan capacitor is good, but the fact that they even went out of their way to put the, you know, audio capacitors where the audio signal will be going through the, you know, the signal path, and then the power capacitors are properly chosen. I'm sure they did their research and even picked proper capacitors based on values like the, you know, the electrostatic properties of the capacitors, you know, the thermal efficiency. You can look at the data sheets of a capacitor and find out which ones work. And you can see they paid attention to detail. You don't have to, like when I bought this Bravo amplifier, I had to change the capacitors because that affects the output, the capacitance value, as well as the capacitor types, the equivalent series resistance or the ESR. That affects the sound quality, and so I changed them out to Nichikan brand, but everything in here is already Nichikan brand and already tuned very well, properly made. So we got the relay, we got all the parts, everything's high quality. You know, the potentiometer is of higher grade than, you know, other hybrids. Everything is well made and put in a very thermally efficient package. You can see they're utilizing every inch of this PCB. It's just beautifully designed. Really commendable job. And just a very nice shielded case, no noise whatsoever. So really that's all I have to say about the Wali. Apologize for the long video. I'm sure it's gone over 30 minutes now, probably even more than that. But I wanted to give a good insight into this amplifier. I wanted to give an insight of what I thought about hybrid amps. I think they're fun. I think they're allow you to power up low impedance devices like my Fostex TH-900s, or even in-ear microphones. Like, you know, you can pretty much power anything with this. It's just a cool, cheap, but serious, as well as Schiit Audio says, it's a serious amplifier, and I'm really impressed with it. Give it a big thumbs up in my book, and well, I'll certainly be back for more from this company. I'm looking forward to, like I said, trying out their multi-bit DAC. So that's all I have for today. If you have any comments, questions, I'll have some links in the description for the review and the other video I mentioned about the teardown of that cheap amplifier from EEV blog, and that review I've mentioned about that I wrote a little while back for the Bravo. I didn't write any text review yet for the Wali, but I will get to it. This video should certainly show all my main talking points. And yeah, if you have anything to say, you can leave it in the comments down below. And if you like the video, feel free to share and like. And I'll catch you next time.